That's how you do it.
Good, thanks.
That's a good one.
I'd like to call the public hearing to order at this time. We will be conducting a public hearing amending the Appendix C zoning regulations of the Boonville Code of General Ordinances for the solar photovoltaic systems. This is something that we have been discussing for quite some time, and in the process we are having a public hearing for people that would like to make statements or ask questions about it. So if you do have questions about the photovoltaic systems, now would be the time for you to come to the pulpit. Thank you, whatever that thing. Podium. Thank you. And make a statement regarding that. This is on the photovoltaic systems. Seeing none, we will close the public hearing, and I will call this meeting to order. If you would, please rise, and we'll have the prayer and Pledge of Allegiance by Councilman Hurt.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Heavenly Father, we come tonight asking that you would give those sitting around this table tonight the wisdom and the courage to make the best decisions for the city of Boonville. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Henry. Roll call.
Beach,
Here.
Hurt,
Here.
Carter,
Here.
Ehlers,
Here.
Heaton,
Here.
Young,
Here.
Evans, Meadows.
Here. Thank you very much. Hearing of citizens' comments. This is the time when, if you have a public statement you would like to make, come to the podium and make it. And we do have one listed guest, Diana Moore. If you would like to come forward now, you certainly are welcome to. She's the economic developer with Central Missouri Community Action. And this is Darren Priest.
Thank you.
If you would sign our register form and...
Will do. Thank you for the opportunity for public comment. I'm Darren Priest. I'm the Executive Director of Central Missouri Community Action. Wanted to give you just a very, very brief update. The clubhouse Head Start over at Kemper Greens parking lot is just about done, and wanted to thank you for your support both individually and collectively. As you all know, we left the VFW building over on Cherry Street several years ago to move into the clubhouse Head Start, the old clubhouse for the golf course. And ever since then, we've been looking for opportunities and thinking of ways to use the old VFW property. It's about 5 acres that we've got. And so we're here tonight to present our plans to you and ask for your support in moving forward with that. So with that, I'd like to introduce Diana Moore, our Economic Development Director, and she will explain our plan.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. I do have some handouts, hopefully not enough for everybody. As Darren said, once we...
Excuse me, Diana, if you could speak in the microphone.
Sorry
We
about that. I
are
apologize.
broadcast worldwide, so everyone will want to hear what you have to say.
Well, as Darren said, I'm Diana Moore. I'm Director of Economic Development with CMCA, and as a part of what my role as Economic Development is also housing development and housing projects. And so, as Darren said, when we left the former Head Start building and the VFW building to move into the clubhouse, we started looking at what can we do with that property and in that area. So what we are proposing and have proposed is a project that would construct 6 single-family homes along Cherry Street. These would be funded by the Missouri Housing Development Commission for affordable rental housing. They are the 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath, and we would be targeting elderly and disabled for these homes. The funding, as I said, was through MHDC, but it's not a tax credit project. This project is actually, we're applying for funds from the Department of Housing and Urban Development that they give MHDC what are called home dollars that are then used in rural Missouri and around the state for housing rental construction. So again, it's not a tax credit project, but it is using federal funds. CMCA will be the owner and the developer, and as well as we would be overseeing the management of the properties throughout the tax period or the compliance period for the home dollars, which is 20 years. I said these were affordable housing. You can see on the list, like for a family of 3, they either would fall under 50% of median income, which is $25,400 annual income, or at 60%, we can go up to $30,480 annual income and be eligible for the property. You had a public hearing about the photovoltaic projects. Well, these actually are super energy efficient. They don't have solar on them, but they are super energy efficient, so that we are striving to go toward as close to a zero energy usage home as possible. Of course, that's not totally possible, but they're super insulated, as well as they're accessible. So they are designed under universal design, which means basically that you can age in place in the home. The 1 bathroom will have a shower that's available to be used as a handicapped accessible shower. And then the hallway, there's extra wide doors to be able to get in if a person's in there in a wheelchair. So it doesn't look like a handicapped home, but it is universally designed so it can easily be retrofitted in terms of handicap access. And basically what we like to refer to this as is aging in place homes. What we are doing, the applications are due to MHDC on September 5th. And MHDC would be making a decision. We would be competing with other community action agencies for some of similar funds to do rental projects similar to this. A decision would be made by MHDC at their December meeting. So what we are requesting is that the City Council consider allowing staff to help us by giving and providing letters of zoning requirements that we can meet the zoning, the comprehensive plan requirements as a part of this application project. And then if the council would like to consider a letter of support, we would greatly appreciate that. And I would be happy to try to answer any questions. What you have as a part of your project is the plot layout of the 6 homes. When I first met with the city administrator and with Megan earlier, we had 7 homes on the proposed layout. And we reduced that to 6 to allow for the requirement, the 60-foot wide lot requirements per house. We also it allowed us to do a little bit of rearranging. There was some concerns on houses number 3 and 4 because of that proximity into the street, Maple Street, that comes in. So this allowed us to make some adjustments in those driveways as well as lighting that was in a couple of those proposed houses. So we have what is in front of you now is the proposed layout from the engineering company. And then you also have a copy of the floor plan as well as the renderings of what the exteriors would look like. And our goal is to make, while that's a general exterior, that we would use different materials on that so they would not look like cookie cutter houses, but each have a unique exterior brickwork colors so that they would fit into the neighborhood. So again, I appreciate the time and the opportunity to speak before you, and we'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Yes, Steve?
Will you keep the VFW building there, or does that come down?
No, that will be
That comes
torn
down.
down to
Okay.
allow for 3 of the houses, yes.
Morris?
One question I have, isn't there some city ground back behind these houses?
Our lots go all the way back to the cliff and down into the river area. So we
Well, the only
go
thing
all
I-
the way down the hill.
Only thing I'd be concerned, all that back behind is gonna be landlocked. There's no street or nothing going back in there.
That's true.
And that, I think we need to at least have where we could extend Maple Street on back. Because I don't know where else we could get access to that property back behind the houses.
That's a pretty steep drop off, isn't it?
Pardon?
Yeah,
That's a pretty steep drop off. I don't
But I
know.
thought there was, at one time, I thought there was more ground back there. Because they was talking about building houses at one town extending Maple Street and building houses straight on back.
That's true. Originally, about, I guess, 10 years ago, there was a proposal to do a subdivision.
Right.
And because of the layout of the land and the hills in that area, it was not going, it could have been done, but not to, in a way that we could have affordable housing because the cost of the infrastructure was going to be so great.
I think our part would be make sure that we did not landlock that back behind there, just in case they did want to build some houses.
Right, so our property goes back all the way to the creek, and there's a road back on the other side of the property, and I don't know who owns that land back there, but as far as our property goes, we don't have any planned use for that land. We plan to leave it undeveloped.
Right, but I'm talking about the future,
Well, I mean, we don't plan to sell it. And I don't know who owns the lot back behind there. There is a street that comes,
I think state does.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know how
Okay.
we need to access that.
Megan, do you understand Morris's concern?
Yes, I
And
do.
you will look into that?
Yep.
Okay. Yes, Noah?
Right now, is this all one lot?
It is.
It's all deeded one lot right now?
The actual legal description, there are, I believe, I'm trying to remember, 4 different lots. Lots 25, 26, there might only be 3, 25, 26, and 27.
Okay, and what's your intention then on these 6 houses? Are they all going to be sitting on 1 lot or 2 lots or 6 lots?
My intention is that we would relot it so that there would be 6 lots.
Six lots, 1 for each house.
Correct.
And then how is your intention then on the back part? Are the lots going to go all the way back, or are they going to cut off after a certain amount and then this be a separate lot back
Well,
here?
we have been discussing about that, actually. So part of it is if we only go back a certain amount and we leave that back open in the rear, again, it goes back to there's no access there. So we couldn't really, we haven't looked into the actual the lot layout as of yet. Our engineer hasn't completed that. So that's a part of this process.
Okay, because, and I don't know if this is your intention, you may not even know because it's 20 years down the line, but typically what I see in these cases is after your 20 years is up on the money, you guys can sell you can sell these
Correct.
houses, and if your organization wanted to do that 20 years from now, I'm sure none of us will be around, but if they decided to do that, my only concern is that exactly that. Now, if you sell these to 6 private individuals, you guys now own a huge giant piece of nothing right back there with no access.
And our feeling on it is that it's really not developable, if that's a word, that because of the grade of the land and because of the river and really, I mean, any overflow of the river, that's going to be a good chunk of that is flood plan. So I just don't see that it's usable land. I would just,
Yeah, and it may not be
Something
usable, but my
undeveloped.
concern is you're still responsible for it.
Sure, sure.
So I mean, you know, you have 6 homeowners that live here that own these 6 lots now, and now your land is overgrown and encroaching on theirs, and it's 20 years down the line, and you got a big piece here that's not worth anything because it's landlocked, so your organization's less likely to really give a hoot about it and take care of it.
We'll discuss that with our consultant and put together a response to that. I'm getting you now. I'm with you.
Steve, did you have a follow-up question? I thought I saw your hand up.
I go.
Okay. Ned?
The drainage, Megan, this is for Megan. That drainage ditch that's back in there, that drains off quite a bit of the stuff from Tropdale. It also, you know, Maple Street, the extension of Maple Street kind of acted as a flow for that. And your property goes right to the edge of the creek, to the drainage creek down there. How is this going to affect that? Or have you even gone through that process yet?
None of those questions have been answered until we get a subdivision plat and a site plan. All those requirements will have to be evaluated once their engineer proposes how everything's going to be done. But yes, this will take a full subdivision review and a full site plan evaluation, including traffic analysis and stormwater and all of those kinds of issues.
In working with a fellow that came here 12, 15 years ago from Kansas City, that's one of his, turned out to be one of his concerns, was not the front portion. But once you get past the slope, what are you going to do? What could he do with that ground, given that amount of slope, because there was going to be so much drainage coming down in there? He had a tough time with that, trying to figure out how to get that done. And I think that's why they ended up pulling away from that. So part of the consideration of your engineers and your architects is going to be, because of that drainage that comes out of Trotdale and comes from these other places to hit that drainage ditch, we don't want that to be encumbered in any way. Then I got a little confused, which is not hard to do, about the income, the moderate income, the median income, and the rent amount. And you didn't, is this a voucher program, or is this just a paid rent program?
This, now, this is not a voucher program. I will say, though, that Section 8 vouchers could be used in these units. That is acceptable by the HUD standards. They could be, but they are not associated with it at this point in time. How that works is that an individual would apply to move into the house, and they have to meet the income restrictions that are set by HUD, which is kind of similar in one way. So if you have a family of 3, it's based upon your family size. So you could make a family of 3, you could go up to as much as $30,480. Then the tenant portion of the rent is basically based upon 30% of the amount of rent plus utilities, 30% of their income.
Okay,
and so
so
that's why it said that the tenant's share is that $450.
So it's a subsidized rent, it's not a voucher rent?
Correct. That is
Okay.
correct.
All right. The question then becomes 20 years. You seem to use that phrase carefully. You and I aren't going to be here. So somebody has to have a plan for that, what's going to happen at the end of that 20 years. Is that subsidy guaranteed to you for that 20 years? I mean, you're going to own this development, so you're going to have to be funded in some way to pay for these houses. And then last question is, what's your budget per house? Have you set that?
We're getting right now the actual cost per house. They're doing the estimates, the construction estimates for us right now. So in answer to your other 2 questions, as you progress through the years, those rental amounts are controlled by HUD. And so we would go in and request rent increases to go according with the raise in inflation and things like that. At the end of the 20-year period, individuals who are currently residing in those homes would have the first opportunity to purchase those homes. So if they're living in there and they want to become homeowners, we actually would, and you're right, I probably won't be here 20 years from now, but the agency would begin, and how that process works, or how we envision it working, is that they would start working with those current homeowners or current renters, I'm sorry, about a year or so out, and have them to find out whether or not they're interested in purchasing them. They have the first right to do that, and then work with them on some homeownership classes to ensure that they would be able to do that. So we envision it being able to, we would hope they would want to purchase the homes and become homeowners.
But you don't start it off as a lease purchase.
No, that is correct.
And also, I wanted to clarify a point too on the subsidy. Nobody's paying us an additional portion of rent that the tenant can't afford. The home dollars that we're accessing basically keep the cost to us to almost nothing. So this is all the federal dollars that we use to build the homes. That's where the subsidy comes in, and then that's spread over the life of that 20 years. So we don't have any operating costs in it other than what the tenant pays. Does that make sense?
Some.
Okay, because it sounded like you said...
You still have your operational costs, whether you're,
Sure.
I mean, even if you can do this on a zero cost
Right.
basis, you're still gonna have your operational costs, and that's what this 450 and 550 is
Correct.
gonna cover.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So in summary, we're not asking for any changes of any regulations. We expect to be fully in compliant with all of the city codes and ordinances. That plan is being prepared at this point. What we're asking for your support is for consideration of our application. And so really just sort of affirming that your codes are in place and it would allow for this type of construction on that type of lot, zoned as it is, and basically just allowing staff to affirm that the codes that are currently in place allow for this type of construction.
Are you required to have any type of market study as to,
Yes, and we actually have undergone a market study on this project already,
okay,
and it is shown as being feasible.
okay. Could you provide a copy of that to the city?
Certainly.
Okay. And would these be would you only be eligible if you are a Boonville citizen, or could someone move here from Elgin, Illinois or something?
Well, anyone would be, these would be available to anyone who wanted to reside in the units, whether they, maybe they would be moving here as a part of their job or coming into the community. And so they are not restricted in any way.
Okay.
Other than income.
Other than income,
right.
correct.
Noah?
The couple of items here that you're requesting from us, what's your time frame for needing them?
The applications, as I said, are due September 5th, and so the two actual letters from staff, we would like to request those to be provided by the 18th of August, if at all possible, because that's kind of our goal. We're trying to work early to get the application as together as we can, but it is due to MHDC on the 5th.
And then my follow-up question to staff is, are you going to be able to vet what is in these requests to be able to write a letter in favor of them? Is that enough time for you to do that?
It's 29 days, counting weekends.
Since we don't have anything more than what you have, we can't evaluate a site plan or anything like that. I assume we could accommodate the zoning if it's just the R whatever for duplex or multifamily or whatever it is. The comprehensive plan, I don't know that I'm prepared to say how explicitly that speaks to that. So whatever it says that would be applicable, I expect we could dig out of it, but I'm not sure it's going to be very on target with any comments. So in their simplistic state there, but as far as evaluating some of the things you brought up, I don't think that's going to happen now.
No, I don't necessarily mean the things that were brought up here tonight. I just mean what they're asking for in these two sentences. In these two letters stating the city has a comprehensive plan and that the new construction will not interfere with that plan in any way. Is the city prepared to say that? Do they have enough evidence to back that statement up and actually put that in writing? And then the second part is the zoning letter stating the zoning designation with brief description, the density requirements and the limits in the zoning, and the description of any conditional use restrictions or overlay regulations that would restrict the property.
The only issue is, based upon what's presented here tonight, is the subdivision and the lots issue and the drainage. I just don't know how that's going to work. I don't know how ownership is going to be maintained. You can't subdivide a piece of property with no access to a portion of it. I mean, that's not feasible, and that doesn't meet any of the subdivision regulations. So until we get a little bit further along in your planning on that piece, I won't be able to opine that the plan can meet those zoning regulations without knowing what that subdivision plan looks like. I mean, if you all can provide that within the next 29 days, we can most certainly look at it, but
We'll have to take a look at that.
But just to clarify, this is fully funded by the federal government. You don't have to provide any local funding or state funding of your own.
Correct.
And there will be no property taxes that come to the city from this.
And no fundraising.
That's, well, gee, you kind of saw where I
So
was
it's
going
tax
with
exempt
that.
because you all are gonna own them,
Correct.
Okay,
so it's tax exempt.
for 20
So
years,
it's
and
property-
then when
property
it, at
tax
20
exempt.
years, when it becomes private property, then there
But
will
we
be
can hang on
taxes.
to it, but if we want to sell it, then
Okay.
current tenants would have the first right to
Okay.
purchase.
Good question on the market. So I want to follow up on that. I want to be very specific. The market area that you used to study this project, was it limited to City of Boonville or Cooper County?
It was limited to the City of Boonville.
Really? Wow.
Is that good or bad?
No, it just absolutely slays me. With the number of vacancies we've got in public rental operations right now, that it just absolutely surprises me that we would have support for that. So,
I think the
yeah.
issue is that these are designed for senior housing, and with the universal design, it really adds an option for this community that's not there now.
One of those ones that's got vacancies is senior, so it's that really surprises me. I'll be interested to see it when you bring it. That's great. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I have a
Yes.
couple questions on organizational capacity. You all are entering into a fairly sophisticated building project with this. Tell us a little bit about your organization's capacity to manage this project.
You know, to-
Well,
If you would speak into the microphone so people can, I
I'm
know,
so
I'm
used
sorry.
to walking, I
I
apologize for
know,
that.
I hate to nag.
So CMCA, we have undergone and been partners with other multifamily housing projects that other developers have done. This will be the first larger project that CMCA will have undertaken on its own. We, however, we do single-family housing construction. We have built houses in the city of Columbia using similar dollars, home dollars, and Shoto dollars. Those have been on single homes on lots, and we've turned around and sold those. We have not rented those out. We currently have one house under construction in Fulton, Missouri, that will be made available for sale, and then we are starting a home in Columbia. So right now, the single-family projects have all been like infill, and this is the first 6-unit housing that we've been done. And our other past history has been with, as I said, multifamily units, like Rankin Mills, where we've been the nonprofit partner in those.
And if you could, because this is our first, as the developer for this type of project, we did hire a consultant that has extensive experience exactly with this type of funding and exactly with this type of development. So I don't know if you want to describe Deb's expertise, but.
Any other questions?
No question, but I just assume then staff and their organization is going to work towards whatever they need from us.
If that's what you want them to do. Okay? Okay.
Thanks so
Thank you
much for
very
your time.
much.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other public comments this evening? Yes, please come to the podium and speak into the microphone.
When does the project start?
Please come to the podium and sign in your name and state your name for the
I'm
record.
Wilda Harrison. I live on Maple Street, and I have a concern about not knowing about this. When are they going to start building? Are they going to take the VFW down? And, I mean, is that right away?
You would have to get in contact with them.
You don't know?
We really do not know.
This is the first presentation.
This is the first presentation that we have had, public presentation. But I imagine they would be glad to talk to you about it if you'd stick around after the meeting.
This plan, there's been no plan submitted to the Planning and Zoning Commission or the Planning Department or anything. This is just kind of an initial
Okay.
concept review and asking the city to evaluate the request for a more of a support and a letter recommending this project and that it meets certain basic standards.
Okay, thank you.
That's as far as the program has gone.
Good, that's what I needed to know.
And Mr. Young asked the question, would the VFW be torn down? And they did say that it would.
Okay.
So that's one answer to your question. Any other public comments?
Can I ask a question? You said to Noah, if that's what you want, as if that's what the council wants?
Uh-huh.
Are we being asked to consent to this?
Well, I think we can, if you want to discuss this further under miscellaneous, we can
Okay.
do that. I'd
All right.
prefer not to do it under public comments.
Yep, that's fine. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Stevens, you want to come up to the podium, please? Everybody knows who you are, but I do ask that you state for the record your name.
I'll sign this first.
Okay?
I can find the pen here. I got one. Okay, about 2 weeks ago, there was a garbage truck parked across our driveway. Jane got in her car, backed out of the garage, and she was watching our mailbox, more or less. Anyway, she didn't see the garbage truck, and she backed into it, and it broke my glass out of my car, and it put a very small dent in the body part close to the fuel tank. But anyway, we called the city police. We called the manager of the garbage truck company, and the driver was there. He was out of the vehicle. He was loading garbage, but he was watching Jane back out. He said he told her to stop, but anyway, she hit it. So that was about 2 weeks ago. So yesterday, or a couple of days ago, Friday I guess it was, I got my first call from my insurance company. And I don't know if I told you, the policeman, the garbage man, and the driver said there was no damage to the garbage truck. So they didn't write up a report, and I guess they dropped it at that. But in the 2 weeks, my insurance company has called tonight. They the garbage truck is asking little under $3,000 damage to their truck. Said it was the right rear wheel. Well, there was no damage to the lower part of my car. So, and I don't know how it could be that much damage to the garbage truck. So I was just passing it on to the city here.
Okay.
Okay, I guess that's all I have, unless you got some questions.
Don't believe so. Thank you, Roy.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, we will move along to approval of the minutes of the July 7th, 2014 council meeting. Those were in your packet. You've had plenty of time to look them over. Were there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, they will stand as presented. Consent items, we have none this evening. Presentation of accounts and claims. Mary, when you're ready.
Ordinance appropriating money. Be it ordained by the Council of the City of Boonville as follows. Section 1. For the purpose of paying salaries on various accounts against the City of Boonville, which have been allowed by the Council at the regular meeting thereof on July 21st, 2014, the sum of $946,462.49. General Fund, $332,542.46. Sanitation, $35,591.74. CIP tax, $13,959.66. Waterworks, $22,536.07. Capital projects, $432,396.55. Wastewater, $41,224.40. Tourism, $5,534.29. Gaming, $62,077.32. Parks and Water, 0. Section 2, the bookkeeper is hereby authorized and instructed to draw checks on the respective city bank accounts in favor of the persons whose salaries and accounts have been allowed as above, amounting to $946,462.49, being the total amount of money above appropriated. Section 3, this ordinance shall take effect and be in full force from and after its passage. First reading on July 21st, 2014. Read for the second time this 21st day of July, 2014, since a copy was made available prior to the meeting.
Second reading, title only.
Ordinance appropriating money.
Morris,
Mayor, I make a motion this be approved.
Mayor, second.
Second.
Becky? Questions or comments? Roll call.
Beach.
Yes.
Hurt.
Yes.
Carter.
Yes.
Ayers.
Yes.
Heaton.
Yes.
Young.
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Meadows.
Yes.
Moving along to unfinished business. Item A, second reading of bill number 2014-015, amending Appendix C, zoning regulations of the Boonville Code of General Ordinances for solar photovoltaic systems.
An ordinance of the City of Boonville, Missouri, amending Appendix C zoning regulations of the Boonville Code of General Ordinances and applying a multidisciplinary approach to applications of the city's building codes, historic district regulations, and public nuisance regulations for solar photovoltaic systems, providing an effective date therefore, and repealing all ordinances in conflict with this ordinance.
Do I hear a motion to accept this? Morris?
I'll make a motion this be approved.
Second.
Second by Ned. Questions or comments? Megan, did you have anything you wanted to say? We've discussed this pretty...
Yeah, the biggest two things that we put in place here, basically we've applied all of their current regulations that we have for fire and electric and structural and mechanical kinds of regulations. We have applied those to the new technology that has come into place. And through a series of many meetings and educating ourselves, bringing in outside consultants and looking at the industry, we did make one restriction in regards to freestanding PV systems in residential areas will not be permitted. So basically they will be limited to putting them on the roof, no freestanding, basically for safety types of reasons. So we also looked at the improvements in technology with the solar panels, that when these things first came out years ago, many of the panels almost exclusively had hazardous materials in them. and they have improved to the point that it's really not an issue except in some of the very large commercial or solar farm applications. So through that educational process, we did look at kind of decreasing some of the more rigorous types of requirements for disposal, as long as the systems do not contain any hazardous materials. If they do, those requirements are still in place. So those are the major issues for the ordinance.
Any questions about the ordinance? Comments? Roll call.
Beach,
Yes.
Hurt,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Ayers,
Yes.
Heaton,
Yes.
Young,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Meadows.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Item B, second reading of bill number 2014-017, approving tourism contracts for services for fiscal year 2014-15.
An ordinance of the City of Boonville, Missouri, approving tourism contracts for services, providing an effective date therefore, and repealing all ordinances in conflict with this ordinance.
Morris,
Mayor, I make a motion to be approved.
do I hear a second?
Second?
Thank you, Becky. Questions, comments? Roll call.
Beach,
Yes.
Hurt,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Ayers,
Yes.
Heaton,
Yes.
Young,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Meadows.
Yes.
New business. Item A, consider approval of recommendations of local agency funding committee. You have a very nice typed printout from Jeff Martin here, and he's going to give us the update.
On behalf of the Local Agency Funding Committee, which I got to chair this year with LaDonna Drew and Nancy Whalen, we set before you those recommendations for the dispersal of $54,000 for those local agencies as listed there before you.
Okay, any questions for Jeff? I know that Susan was here. She sat through the presentations, and it is very interesting to hear some of the things that are going on and the needs in the town, and you guys did a very good job, I think.
Thank you.
Listening and investigating on some things that needed to be done. So, and Morris was the committee, or the council rep, and I don't know if he has any comments, but
One comment, the committee worked very hard. There were some questions that came up. They researched it, and I can honestly say that the guidelines was followed to the T. There's one that didn't make the application on time that we hated to say no to, but the guidelines said no. So I just like to applaud the committee for all the work they did, and it wasn't an easy choice they had to make, but they thought about it long and hard before they made the final decision.
any questions or comments? Morris?
Do we need a motion to?
We do.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that their recommendations be approved.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second. Susan,
No, that's all right.
you were way ahead of me.
I think I saw her hand go up. Thank you, Susan.
Hold on a second.
Roll call.
Beach,
Yes.
Hurt,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Ayers,
Yes.
Heaton,
Yes.
Young,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Meadows.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
And may I just
Certainly
say
appreciate
again,
it.
thank you to Mary McAllister, who gets us through this whole process throughout the year, and when we go off and leave, then she's the one who handles all of the paperwork and keeps everything going wonderfully. I so appreciate what you do all the time for us.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff.
This means, Jeff, you'll be back next year.
Thank you so much. Okay, item B, rental housing report and recommendations, and former Councilman Mike Kelly is with us this evening.
Hello, everyone. I thank the City Council for the opportunity to come and speak tonight on this subject. I don't know if I wake this up right. Right there in yellow?
Password's right here.
Oh, I see.
I'm trying to confuse anybody.
And I know the password for the city. The purpose of this presentation is to provide you the findings of a special committee that was formed and conducted most of all of their meetings last year. This special committee was on the rental housing in the city of Boonville. I think you were given a copy of this presentation. I'm sure it's not new to you, but I'm going to go ahead and go through it. I recommend, just in the interest of your time, that you save any in-depth questions for the end or comments for the end. However, if you have anything for clarity purposes on what's on the chart, just to make sure you understand what's being said, I would recommend you ask those as I go along, just so we get it straight. This was established by a request from the City Council through the Mayor. I was the chairman. We had participants tonight. We had Ned Beach and Steve Haig here. The others are not present, but Jenna Mudd Buellin, Kathleen Conway, Tony Covington, and the late Chris Holmes was part of this committee. And I want to pass on my thanks to all of the participants. It took a lot of commitment from these people to come to these meetings and provide very constructive inputs as we went through this. Our general scope was to determine whether our current ordinances, or even our current manpower, as I'll discuss later, adequately addressed our city's need relative to rental housing. The issues that we discussed, and these are common threads that you would find at any city that is considered a rental housing ordinance. The two things that keep coming up that they try to address are the safety, health, and welfare of the public that use the rental housing in their communities, as well as the impact of rental properties and their conditions on property values in their communities. That's what we addressed or tried to address as we went through options or considerations for our city. Now, we had a lot of participation by the Landlord Association, other members. That some people called me to provide input. I got some email. I had it in different ways. The landlords were the most vocal. They were concerned about the increased cost of these inspections on them and on the renters that they would probably pass the costs on to. The possibility that the current codes that we would, or the codes that we would have in effect for them, would cause them to expend more on their properties than they planned to make them compliant, and concern that the rental properties are being singled out as a type of property with problems or nuisances for the city relative to those two issues I mentioned a little while ago. The property owners, other property owners that are not rental landlords, have expressed concern about generally nuisances. Most of these are on the exterior of the property, of course, as you can imagine. Obviously, weeds, you know about that. We talk about that annually, that we address those with letters and follow up when we have those kinds of nuisances. There are other nuisances that are identified, again, consistent with our codes and whether they're following the codes. Renters, although this wasn't an exhaustive input, it's hard to get these kinds of inputs, but renters have told me and members of our committee that some of the properties they've seen in Boonville are in such bad conditions they know outright they would be unhealthy for them or their family members, or they suspect that it would be unhealthy, but they didn't have the means or the ability to check that or verify that at first look. All right, our research, and this I'm going to spend a little time on this chart because this is the most integral part of our research, is we considered a study from Birmingham, Washington, I think it was. Yes, Bellingham, Washington. And this study that was done in 2008 for their city was so well done. I highly recommend, if you want to see a program that is studied, and they must have more resources than we would. This legislative planner that spent all this time looking at 18 different cities and more had a very logical approach towards this. And I want to highlight some of the things that he said in this report. By saying that when he looked at his policy up front, he considered four things most important to developing policy of this kind in the city. He considered that it needed to have, you have to assume that it had shared responsibility among the city, the renters, and the owners to qualify rental housing, to have quality rental housing, that it must be universally applied, not just to one particular neighborhood or one group of people, that it must be universally applied across the city, that it needs to be least cost, so there's the least impact to the renters, the owners, and to the city, and that the city is assumed to have the right to regulate this because it's considered, in this case, a business, this report, a business that has an impact on health, safety, and the community's livability. Now, that was the assumption that he made when we went and looked at these 18 cities. Now, I'm not going to go over each of those 18 cities, but I will say that there was a common thread in most cases, or at least in the majority of the cases, that they all had a license or certificate of compliance. They called them different things, either a license or certificate of compliance. One of them actually called it a business as well, not just Bellingham, but another city. So it's a business license in their case. They all had inspections of some sort, usually a duration 1 year to 5 years, as long as 5 years in some cases. In some cases, they would vary with how often you'd have to have them repeated, depending on the condition they were in. They almost all cases, they reference the International Property Maintenance Code as their guide for how to inspect. Several of them had fines for unlicensed property, and they were hefty, as much as $1,000 a day if you tried to operate without a license. They had the license and the certificate of compliance had to be displayed in the unit, so the individual that's renting for you saw that it got approval from the city. And they also had some conditions where they had random sampling to cut down on manpower, which is an interesting consideration if you were to consider those kinds of things. One particular city, Sacramento, had the exterior inspected only, and that if there were several amounts of nuisances on the outside, they would require an interior inspection, meaning that would probably imply that you have other problems as well. And they even had a self-inspection program, which is something I'm going to bring up in a minute. Okay, now we discussed these 18 programs in detail, but we thought that it would be very appropriate to look at local cities in Missouri and try to consider what cities close to us have done. And that's where we focused on Columbia and Moberly. Our research on the Columbia program is through Lee Britt, the neighborhood services manager in Columbia. She was very helpful, did a couple of teleconferences with her. She provided a lot more information than this. I'm not going to go over each of these things. But in general, they have an inspection program over a certain period of time, and they have professionals involved when it comes to heating and air conditioning. Otherwise, it's done by the city inspectors. And it's a very reasonable amount. If you look at the cost, this is one of the lowest of the 18 cities that we considered. This is one of the lowest cost programs. In Moberly's case, they're a little different than the 18 we studied. And it's important to discuss. The individual that came and actually talked to our committee was Miss Paige Douglas. She's a firefighter who was hired as the occupancy manager for their city and also is dual-hatted as a firefighter for their city. Their program is unique in that they actually inspect all residences, not just rental property. They inspect the privately owned property as well if it changes hands. So if it's sold, it gets an inspection before it can be occupied again by a new resident. They're a smaller city than Columbia. Their costs are a little higher, and you kind of see that. At the bigger the city, sometimes they can reduce their costs and efficiencies. So they're a little more expensive, however, not unreasonably so. And they have so many parts of the program, I could spend hours on it. I provided a lot of the details to Mary for her reference, examples and copies of all their certificates, even their ordinance and so forth. I provided all that she gave us, and she's ready to give anybody more if they'd like to know it. Now, I put the International Property Maintenance Code on here for two reasons. It's the one, and it's pretty hard to read from out here. I know you have a hard copy of that. Actually, for several reasons. First of all, this is the one I mentioned to you that most cities use. Secondly, it's already in our Code of Ordinances. We don't have to add it. It's already been applicable for years now. And thirdly, I want to point out the kinds of things that are in here are not unreasonable in my view when you consider safety, health, and welfare. They are things that keep the house safe. I mean, when you talk about electrical, these are the key electrical issues you would be concerned about if you want to worry about safety: water heater, furnace, stairways with handrails. I mean, these are all things that if you want to have someone be safe with children or adults, this is the kind of thing you want to be concerned about, whether you are owner-occupied or renter for that matter. So windows, obviously important. We have these, whenever you modify a house, you have to take these considerations in, if you're grandfathered with existing structures. But the reason these are in is because we want to get firefighters in to get people out in case of a fire. That's why these proper egress are in here. Those are just examples of the kinds of things. No leaks, obviously. These are things you don't want to have mold or any of those kinds of issues. I put windows in there twice, sorry about that. But the kinds of things, even on the yard, trash, debris, so these are all things that exist on either in the International Property Maintenance Code or with a separate ordinance that we put in either parking or vehicles or yards, yard maintenance. Okay, so what are the options? It really comes down to three kind of categories that we would recommend for you to consider. Option one is status quo. Now, status quo, again, you have the International Property Maintenance Code. Let me go into that. You have the International Property Maintenance Code. I'm sorry, let me go back and just talk about each of those briefly. The three categories is status quo. You have the code in place. Is what you have adequate to enforce that? Are you doing a reasonable job? Do you need to do more? The second one is licensing only. That's a little different in that you actually require a license, but you don't require them to be inspected either by the city or by private inspectors. You do require a self-inspection where the individual that owns it, whether it be through expertise that they hire or through their own expertise, say that they meet the International Property Maintenance Code safety requirements that you have on the books, and how they meet. You put out a checklist and they fill out that checklist and sign it and send it in as part of getting their license. The last option is licensing and inspections, and that's like the 18 that I mentioned to you, and also with Moberly, where you have either a public inspector or a private inspector that's certified by the city to provide those inspections, sign off saying that you meet all those criteria, the key criteria. Okay, so now does it answer the issues that I talked about, those first two? The status quo, the city cannot fully assess the compliance inside the structure. And I point out, outside the structure, we could do more. We could take the International Property Maintenance Code as applicable on the outside of the building, and we could say, well, not only your grass height and your weeds, but your structure has holes in the soffit and so forth. Your windows need have glazing issues, leakage and so forth, or broken windows, or the door is broken, or whatever. You could do certain things without even going in the house. You can do those today. They're in the International Property Maintenance Code. We don't currently enforce, as far as I know, other than vehicles and trash and debris and yard maintenance. We don't currently enforce any of those other issues. But you currently have those, and you can do it on the outside. But on the inside, you wouldn't be able to hold them compliant on that unless there's a building permit requested of the building inspector. And Steve had to go into the building to check to see whether you're compliant with modifications. Or if he had a complaint from somebody that is renting that says they feel like it's unsafe to live in their house and they want to know if they're safe to go back in there, he can follow through with those as well. He doesn't get too many of those in a year. Most people do not follow that kind of complaint trail. They either leave the house if they feel unsafe, or they suffer through it, I suppose, if it's a problem. Okay, as far as the second issue and the property values, we are limited by our current manpower to enforce those codes, I believe, from what I've talked with the city staff about what they have available to enforce these codes. So that's where you are with status quo. Could you do more? Well, it depends on your resources, I suppose. Option two, do you safeguard the safety, health, and welfare? Yes, assuming that the property owner does due diligence, checking through the details and making sure that they do meet the codes and compliance on, and they check those either with expertise of their own or through other people that have that expertise. yes, you do, you can meet that. That's assuming they meet the self-inspection requirements well. As far as the property values, yes, you would probably, as long as you have the resources. Again, it's roughly the same as number two, if you have, number one, if you have the resources. Now, option three is the only way that you really reach out and get some sort of assurance, either through a sampling program or a full inspection program like many cities do. It's the only way that you'll get an assurance that you meet the safety, health, and welfare, and that you have something to guarantee that the properties are kept up and not affecting the neighborhood and the value of the other properties. So those are the three options. I know they're kind of cursory, but this is intended to be the start of a conversation. I would be glad to, the lights over here. I would be glad to discuss it any further, or if you have any questions, this would be the time to ask me.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Anyone have any questions for Mike about his committee's report? Steve?
So what does the committee recommend?
Well, I used to have a recommendation. I used to have a recommendation here, and I took it out because I really thought that maybe you guys needed to talk it over a little bit first. But quite simply, I would recommend you crawl before you walk and then you run. And one city, actually, this report actually said you could consider just that. You could start out just getting licensed and getting self-inspection going and see how it's going for you. And then you could actually go to the inspections if you don't think it's doing enough for you. Certainly from a manpower sense, that would be the better way to go, because you wouldn't be heading with probably a full-time man. If you do go for a full-time inspector program, and I can't speak for Steve and the impact on him, it doesn't have to be in the code enforcement area. It could be like Moberly did. It could be a split body with the fire station, and that provides a good opportunity for the fire station to get a part-time firefighter, and also because they've taken a man cut over the last year and plus two, I think. So they could get some extra firefighter support, and they could get an inspector for the city. But I think you need to crawl before you walk. So I think you need to, if you're going to consider doing anything, start with a licensing program, maybe a self-inspection program, and see where it goes from there.
So is a part-time person in Moberly able to handle?
I think a part-time person can handle that kind of construct, yes. But if you go to any kind of inspection program, you're going to need someone at least for part of the year, and there's a seasonal kind of impact here to number of inspections required. She says she'll meet inspections with 2 days, no more than 2 days from a request. So when it's certain parts of the year, from April through September, she's more than full-time on the occupancy, less full-time on the firefighter, but then she's available in winter months and also holiday seasons to help with the shifts. So it'd be a seasonal impact.
Okay, other questions? Okay, thank you, Mike, very much. Reports of standing committees. Item A, Board of Public Works. Morris?
It's basically a routine meeting, had some requests to waive some penalties, and the board denied the request.
Okay. Boonville Housing Authority, Ned?
Good meeting, pretty much routine. Any questions?
Tourism Commission, Susan?
The meeting was canceled due to lack of agenda items.
Okay. Planning and Zoning Commission, Becky?
I was out of town, was unable to attend the meeting, but the minutes are in the packet, and it looked like it was a good but short meeting.
Reports of city officials. City Administrator.
I have nothing tonight, Mayor.
Mayor, I have one last committee. I think I've said this once, but this is really, really the last board that I have. And the reason that this one never gets used. So it's sort of the forgotten Board of Appeals. And Steve, what does ICC stand for?
International Code Council.
Okay. And this is a Board of Appeals, and it is called for in our ordinances, and let me explain to you what they do, just because you'll probably never hear about it again. The Boca Board of Appeals shall consist of 7 members appointed by the mayor with council approval. And the qualifications, they're very specific about who can be on a board. 1 member must be a qualified electrician with 5 years or more of experience. 1 must be a qualified plumber with 5 years' experience and live in the city of Boonville, so they have to meet certain requirements. A building contractor, a mechanical contractor, and then 2 laymen and a representative from the city fire commission. So it's very specific, and what they do is, if someone gets in a disagreement with our building inspector, Steve Haig, and he said it hasn't happened in how many years?
I've been here 11.
11 years, has not happened thus far, but it could happen next week, you never know, so it has to be in place. If there is a disagreement, this board moves into action, and within 10 days must meet and act on the dispute. So, you have before you 7 names, and I would like to appoint those individuals and ask for your approval.
Mayor, I'll make a motion we approve.
Okay, thank you, Morris. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Beach,
Yes.
Hurt,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Ayers,
Yes.
Eaton,
Yes.
Young,
Yes.
Evans. Yes. Meadows.
Yes.
Okay, City Councilor Megan.
I have nothing further this evening.
Economic Developer Jim Gann.
Good evening, Council. I'll be referring to the Economic Development Report that's in your packets. The first thing I'd like to draw your attention to is item 1C, I have mailed 110 letters out to prospective companies that might be interested in our bakery. I provided you a sample of that letter that's in your packet, as well as one of the replies that I've had regarding that. I've also had a phone call from a major grocery store chain saying that they empathized with our situation. They didn't need the capacity, but they operated in the bakery circles and would keep that at the top of their mind as they encountered their peers. This community of industrial bakers is much smaller than I expected, because that 110 letters that I sent out was for aspiring regional bakeries, cookie and cracker bakers, and dog biscuit makers, and that's a national list. There's 110, so it's much smaller than I imagined. But anyway, I wanted to let you know that I was doing some work on the bakery. On item 3, this will be C, D, E, and F. You've heard me speak about some terms in those times that we've met, and economic gardening is one that I talk about, entrepreneurship's role in economic development, young companies and how they create jobs. So I've provided you just some articles that I've run across in the past month about those things that I thought you might find informative. And there's also an interesting article in there that I very much enjoyed called Economic Development Needs a New Business Model. And the theory is there that as skilled workers become more difficult to get, which we are seeing play out in real time, is that if we have a cool place for skilled workers to live, the industries have to come here because that's where their workers would be. So I've given you the Reader's Digest version of that article, but I still encourage you to read it. On item 6A, Project Egg is a project that we've been working very diligently on. We're hopeful to have an announcement regarding that before the end of the summer. And then the last thing I'd like to draw your attention to is item 8A, is that the Municipal Facilities Authority is actively working on the creation of a revolving loan fund. It was created some time ago. We are now formalizing the process and now have a packet assembled for an applicant to take and respond to. So it's getting better each time we meet. I would expect that would be live over the next month or so. Can I answer any questions for you? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jim. City Clerk, Mary, do you have anything?
I have nothing to report.
Let's see, we do have park board minutes.
Yeah.
It's our Parks Rec. See,
I was unable to make the meeting, but the minutes are in your package.
okay. Gary, do you have anything you want to add at this time to that? Okay. Okay. Miscellaneous. Ned?
I have two. The first one is a fun item. As you know, there were all kinds of baseball tournaments over this last couple of weekends. So I spent my about 12 days down in Sykeston in Cape Girardeau. Most of those I spent in Cape Girardeau. I'm going to give you their tourist brochure, but I don't want you to look at anything in the tourist brochure. You can't look
Can you look at it?
except the last page. Okay? This is about a conversation, a long conversation that Megan and I have been having for quite some time. Okay, first,
Last page,
it has to do with cleaning up blight. And what you see, now you can open. What you see on that last page is absolutely fantastically wonderful. As a tourist, when you go to Cape Girardeau, which by the way is it's a small town really, it's 38,000 people, but it's a regional hub. It's got a university and it's got two big medical centers. Geez, it's got enough retail to just drive you nuts.
Ned, if you could get to a microphone, please.
I'm sorry, Julie.
That's okay.
So I visited a few of these places and looked at them, and I won't bore you with all of that. I had two really great friends at Cape Girardeau that did a lot of business with in the mid-'70s, and they have told me how wonderful they have developed the town. But the big thing they did to clean up blight was they set these corridors. These are the corridors that you drive to go to various different places in that town. Now, the one that's not quite as good as it should be is called Independence Street. You see where number 44 is? So I happened to take a drive down through that, going toward the river. And as I got closer to the river, you saw more open fields, grassy fields, obviously where they demoed something. And I get close to the bottom street down there, and guess what's happening? There's a big track hoe up on the property taking down a house. So this is fun. It'll require some follow-up, Megan, if we decide to do it, but it's something you and I have talked about and frustrated about for forever, is they made a point of making sure where people drove inside their town, and they made a point of cleaning up those streets.
So development along their corridors, they had put some real emphasis in not only with the new development, but also cleaning up the old developments?
Yeah. Interestingly enough, the downtown, it felt like it was a dream downtown. Remember the dream program we tried to do? I mean, it's really cool, and they got parking problems 10 times as bad as ours. Steve?
So is this something the city did, or is this something individuals invested in, took care of this?
The individual investment on the tourist attractions is true. You're right about that. You know, for instance, the St. Vincent's Church, the Catholic Church cleaned that up and renovated it. The city did not do that. What the city did was that they put the requirements on the corridors, and they put emphasis on the corridors so that they could clean up the blight on those streets that you travel. So what you're doing is, you know, like we go north of where you're fixing your house, right? As we go north from there, we got some pretty good blight on that street. And is that good? No. Is that impressive to your tourists? No. So they set the corridors, and they're working to keep those. Now, Steve, that doesn't mean they ignore the rest of the city, if that's what you were going to ask. But that's where they focus their attention.
You're saying the city focuses their attention on cleaning this up? So they got to
The same
condemn
process,
buildings and clean them up?
same process that Steve goes through, but he's only one guy.
Right.
You know, so we only get to clean up 3 or 4 or 5 properties a year. And here, they've been doing it for 10 years. And it's just amazing, the difference, driving on these corridors into the town. If we could take a bus and go down there and have some real fun, and they've got an aisle down there too, you know. But sometimes when you're out on the road, you see stuff. I know Noah, you and I have talked about it. You see stuff and you say, dang, we could do that. So that was item number 1. Item number 2, Julie, I'd like, if you don't mind, I'd like to give you my comments with regard to the CMCA thing. I think that the council is being asked to do something prematurely. I don't feel as if I have enough information to decide to back this project. I'd really like to see the market study since it's only on Boonville. And there's a few other items in here too. We don't need to detail all that, but I don't feel that I have enough information to say go.
Okay. So would you like to put it on the agenda for discussion at the next meeting and have the market study at the next meeting? And that's on the 18th, excuse me, so that gives us plenty of time to discuss it before the deadline, isn't it?
I
First
thought
meeting
she
in
wanted
August,
it.
you were talking about, first meeting in August?
Yeah.
Their date's
That's
the
when
18th.
yeah, their date's August 18th.
Oh, the 18th, okay.
But ours would have to be.
So August the 4th, we actually have a meeting August the 4th. I'm sorry, I flipped too many pages. So we would have a meeting before then where we could discuss it and have the public input.
I think that's the right way to approach it,
Okay.
honestly, Mayor.
The other issue too is I don't even know if the organization has, I mean, if August 4th is even enough time for them to get, obviously they've got the market study, but more concerning, I think, to city staff would be looking at site plan, to be able to make an evaluation. They're asking us to write a letter of recommendation, and without a site plan, we really can't do that. So I hope August 4th is, enough time to even present that to, prior to that, actually. I mean, staff would have to see that prior to that, or at least prior to the 18th, to be able to, get a letter. I mean, obviously, if you've seen it before the 18th, you could come to the 18th meeting and say, we've seen it, this is our opinion, you guys decide what you want to do, and then we could, if we voted then to back the project, then the city could write a letter of recommendation on the 18th. But my concern is just being able to see all those things and have city staff vet them. I'm sure not even just city staff either, planning and zoning actually may need to actually be the one that vets it. So now we're gummed up on whatever their timeline is for their next meeting too. So it's just kind of a short notice. I hope we can get it all in, but not really sure we can.
Yeah, because planning and zoning wouldn't be till the 12th.
Right. Okay. So put it on the agenda and have staff report back as to what's going on?
I'll give my input to somebody else. I'm not going to be here the 4th.
Okay.
And I guess the advice to the organization would be is just to get all the information to the right people as soon as possible, so it can
Right.
be vetted and looked at.
Okay. Any other miscellaneous?
I have a question.
Yes, Cardi.
What do we do now with all the information that Mike gave us on this rental thing?
That's a good question. What do
Yeah.
you want to do with all the information?
I'd like to move forward with it. I think it's really, really important for our community.
Okay. Well, I see some heads nodding. What I would suggest, and it's up to you, but what I would suggest is that maybe we get a couple of volunteers from the council to work with staff members and to look at that information and to see what's feasible, what's not feasible, what can be done, to discuss it in a little smaller group, and then to come back and report back to the committee, or to the council, and let the council decide, where they want to go from there. But it's entirely up to you.
Well, and do we need to make sure we have a consensus of that first? Because I would disagree with that.
Yes, okay.
I mean, in my opinion,
I'm open to suggestions.
I think that the work Mike did, even though he did a lot of work, I think it was probably more one-sided than a whole picture. What I mean by that is, I've done some of my own research, and, I think there's a lot of information lacking in his report that's not reported to us. For instance, the information that the state already has many of these things in place. They've got laws already in place at the state level. There's 3 different Missouri statutes that are solely based on this type of situation. And, so I think, me personally, I'd want information from a different perspective. I don't think this council should be acting on something that's just from one committee. In my opinion, that, from the very get-go, one of my suggestions on that committee was to make sure that we had all the parties present on the committee, and I don't feel they were. I don't think there was a landlord representative on the committee to voice their expertise and their experience. I don't think there was a real estate professional who I think in this community probably either, let's just say their hands touch quite a few real estate transactions and real estate in our community in general. So I think that voice was missing from this committee, and I
Mr.
think
Beach isn't considered a landlord?
no, I don't think he was, because he was put on there as a city council representative. Him, Kathleen, and so his representation was to his constituents. Nobody from the landlord association was on the committee. So
But
I think
Kathleen was the council person, and Ned could have been considered the...
could have been or was, because now you're trying to make it fit, is how I kind of feel. I mean, to me, Ned and Kathleen were council representatives.
Okay.
I don't think Ned was put on there because he was a landlord. If he
Well,
was,
I would disagree. He was put on there because he was...
Well, I don't think that was a fair representation, because he's conflicted, because he's a city councilman, so his first would go to his constituents, not from the perspective of from the landlord.
He also asked to be on the committee, if I remember correctly.
Okay, whether he did or not. I also think that, for instance, the information that was given, the 2008 study, I've thoroughly vetted it. The average city in that study had 161,000 population. One of them had more than 1 million. This is not Boonville. I mean, this study has nothing to do with Boonville. It has to do with liberal states, liberal cities, and...
I disagree.
Okay, let him finish.
I think, yeah, I mean, you can disagree, but I mean, the average population of this study was 161,000. And to me, that's not the makeup of Boonville. My personal opinion, I think Boonville has a couple bad landlords, and I think the city's had trouble with them over the years, and I think they're tired of dealing with them. But I don't think you throw the baby out with the bathwaters because you've got a couple rotten apples in the barrel. So.
Steve?
Let's take the information that we have from the committee and take your information, put it together. You can't have enough information. And let's just put something together that the council can vote on sometime here.
Well, that's what I was hoping would
Yeah.
happen was, I'm not saying this group needs to get together and say, okay, let's pick out option 3 and go with that, and go back to the committee.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, take that. If you want to volunteer to be on the committee and state these issues that you have with it, I think that's great. We need that. But I think to just kill it is not right. So,
Well,
Kari?
I understand what Noah's saying, but laws and ordinances are only as good as they're enforced. So, do we all know what the laws and ordinances are and who's enforcing it? Number one. And number two, if we have a lot of fine landlords in Boonville, I'm not disputing that at all. And if there is only a couple that are bad, then the good ones surely are not going to mind some checks and balances for the people that rent. I mean, I can think of a couple right now that are horrible. I mean, they're shameful that anybody lives there. And I just don't see any reason why we couldn't move forward with this to protect our citizens.
Okay. Ned?
We do have the ordinances, we do have the people, we do have the capability to
I'm not talking
to
about
shut them down.
capability, but who, I mean, is it being done? Obviously not when you have certain landlords that places look like they're falling in.
You answered the question yourself. The answer is no, it's not being done.
Right.
It's not being done because we're understaffed. It's not being done because we're not approaching it. It was interesting that Mike made the approach, and we talked about it in the committee. You can do a drive-by, Perry. You can see that the property is not maintained. You can see that it's not being taken care of. And you can approach the grass, and you can approach the trash. But do you go ahead and take the next step, and do you approach the windows? Do you approach the doors? Do you approach all of the things on the outside that you know are not right? Now, you can't go in the property without permission, right, Steve? But you can certainly approach a whole bunch of stuff on the outside if you have the people and you have the staff to do it. I don't take issue with anything that Noah said or what you said. I think the other thing that we haven't done is that we haven't surveyed the problem. We have pictures here, and these are good pictures, and I've seen them too, Mike. We've talked about them. We don't know if the problem, the Blake problem, is an owner-occupied problem, or if it's a rental problem, or if it's both. Once we know what the problem is, then we can approach it. Do we need any new laws? I'm not a fan of new laws, so don't don't even try that. We may not need anything new. We may already have it. We just are not enforcing it.
Here again, I think it would behoove us to have a smaller group who works with staff to figure some of these things out and come back to the council. Steve?
Ned, we have a corridor going to the boat down Morgan Street.
I know it. I know it, Steve.
And you can look at those houses, and they're not livable,
It's just been-
period. Okay?
Yeah.
That needs to be cleaned up. If you want to clean up a corridor, that's where you start.
And you know, the first one, the very,
clean
very
that
first
up.
one is
Clean it up,
owner occupied.
Okay.
Jeez. You know?
Noah?
You know, I got a story to tell, and I've been a realtor since 1997, and in my very first year, I had a young couple I was taking around showing properties, and they were young, they were low income, so obviously the properties I showed them were lower price properties. And one of the lessons I learned my very first year in real estate is I walked in the property first, and they were behind me, and I walked in, and I looked around, and I said, man, this is a dump. And I turned around and looked at their faces, and they had the deer in headlight look. And I didn't quite understand what was wrong, and then they started talking, and I realized they loved the place. So I guess the lesson of this is I would caution people who look from the outside on a property and who think they can look at a property from the outside and think that that property is unlivable, and understand that we have a free market in real estate, and I would almost argue properties are worth what they're worth. And I've got rental property, and if I wanted to rent my properties for $250, they would be in the condition of a $250 property a month. Currently my properties are $500 a month, and they're in the condition of a $500 a month. They don't have granite, they don't have fancy stuff, and I'd like to think I take care of my property. But again, I learned a long time in real estate, just like love, there's a house for everybody, just like they say there's love for everybody. And to me, I understand. I live right by there, so I see those houses all the time, and I see the condition that they're in on the outside. I don't dispute that. But I don't also necessarily think that we need new regulation to try to license landlords because we think it's a business. So.
How do you think we should address it?
Personally, one of the questions I have is, and Steve, in the last 5 years, how many complaints have you had?
As far as...
From renters that they thought their property was unlivable?
I can't answer that specifically.
Roundabout?
But I can tell you it'll run in spurts. So far this year, I've had one.
One.
So sometimes there may be a month that all of a sudden I get 3 or 4, but then it disappears for a while. So yes, okay. There is some out there, but...
So to me, I think we're making a huge bureaucracy out of something that might be 1 or 2 or 3 problems that, maybe we can if somebody comes to Steve with an issue, Steve has the they invite him in their home, whether it's a rental or not, he has the right to go in, and if he finds code violations, then I think he can handle it on a case-by-case basis. I'd also point out, just like this that I brought, that I don't even think, was probably even brought up during the other committee's research. The state of Missouri has really good landlord-tenant law. In fact, Secretary of State has its own pamphlet of responsibilities to the tenant and to the landlord. It clearly states in there that a landlord can withhold half a rent one time a year to pay for code violations that aren't being taken care of by a landlord. So I think there's other avenues. Maybe our public isn't educated that they have these other avenues to do. But to me, I don't think you create this huge, let's license landlords and let's make them do inspections. And I don't think we do all that for a handful of bad properties that maybe if we, educated the public and if they had issues with the property they lived in, they could contact Steve and Steve can handle it on a case-by-case basis.
But do you think that will solve these problems?
Is it our responsibility to solve that problem? And frankly, he went around and took pictures. Mike, are you still here? How do you know that every picture you took of these properties are rental properties? Did you do some kind of research that told you they were rental properties?
Right. I went to the Cooper County integrity map, and in there is some detail on whether it's owner occupied or whether it's owned by somebody else with a different address. So if there's somebody living there, in all those cases, those aren't vacant properties. Well, with the exception of the two right next to the Shell station, which are recently vacant, they were occupied until a month ago.
Yeah, I saw them moving out over
Right.
the weekend.
Yeah, so I mean, they were occupied a month ago when I first took those pictures. They were occupied. But in all those cases, the owner is, and in some of those cases, in many of those cases, that's just my corridor when I go to work across the street from your house. That just happens to be what I see when I go to work. I could have taken a different path and taken other pictures. That's just down Morgan Street and up 3rd Street kind of thing. And there might be a few from another location. I think when I went over towards your property there, Steve, one day I took some properties on Walnut or on 6th Street, I think, on the way up there. But you can take other routes and you can find other properties. But yes, I did do my research. They are rented properties.
And to your thing about those particular pictures, we have to understand that cosmetics aren't always necessarily a code violation. Now, obviously, if you have a leaning, whatever the code violation is, I don't know what the percentage is, if it's leaning a certain percentage, or, if you go by and see no guardrail on a porch and there's supposed to be a 30-inch guardrail, those are the kind of things that, if Steve has time to do, which, I'm not even sure if he does, but if he did, those are things that can be done by case-by-case basis. I just don't think we need to create a whole bureaucracy to solve this problem. We've got what we need on the ordinances. Really what we're lacking is manpower. Do we want to hire somebody to do this? Do we want to have Steve do this more full time? I don't even know if you have time, Steve. Do you have time to?
The biggest problem I see is on a lot of these, it seems like you chase yourself around and around. You send out notifications and you have to re-notify. And then if it gets to the point where it goes to the prosecuting attorney, how long is it going to, how long before we get answers back from that?
Yeah, but that's part of the beast, though. That's the part of the beast that we're creating here. I mean, that's just going to be the new norm if that's what we decide.
Just be a bigger beast.
Yeah.
Steve?
First, being a landlord is a business. Okay? And then you can have two bad landlords, slumlords, and they could own 40 or 50 houses. So
It's true.
two of them can totally affect your land values everywhere. Period.
Mayor,
Yes, Henry?
and Noah talks about a handful. It's a big handful. I see the mayor driving around town sometimes. I don't know if she's noticed me seeing, but it's almost embarrassing for me to see her see some of these places in town. It's horrible. I mean, some of these pictures, it's horrible. We tore down a bunch of places down on Water Street to put the boat there that were probably not as bad as some of these, but we got to start somewhere. We've got to start somewhere, and I understand some of you are landlords, but we've got to clean up these places. It's horrible. I mean, some of them are falling down, and from the outside, you can, if they're bad on the outside, I guarantee you they're bad on the inside.
most likely.
Mike, do you want to approach?
I just wanted to address one thing that Noah said, that relative to the question to Steve. Yes, it can be a cumbersome process if you set it up that way. The reason that these programs are set in place is to provide it teeth. If you set up that you must have a license to have occupancy, then you don't have occupancy, and that's an incentive on a renter, an owner, to clean up his property, clean up his or her property before they rent it out. And if they don't clean it up, they can't rent it out. So all of a sudden you have incentive and you have teeth. You don't have to worry about waiting for the lawyer's reaction to this, because you can't occupy until you have the license. So you have to put teeth in to make anything work.
Becky?
I believe the issue looks a little further warranting. We've got options available to us. You can go with 1, 2, or 3, not change anything at all, do a combination, or what's in, but I think the safety, the health, and the welfare of the community and our citizens is what's important. And if it's 1 or 2 individuals, that's where the focus is going to fall on. It's not going to fall on those that are responsible about their property and take care of things and fix things as people move out and others move in. But I think it's a community issue. I don't think it's just a city council issue. I think this is a community issue.
So would you like to make that a motion that we continue to?
I would like to make a motion that we put together a committee to further look into this and bring it back before to see if any action is going to be taken.
Do you want that council and staff only? Or
I think we need to include some of our people that own rental property. I mean, this is going to affect them. They're citizens in our community, and they should have a voice.
What about renters making up part of that too?
Okay. I don't want to
No, I
reinvent the
get it.
wheel here,
No.
because they spent a lot of time and effort, and I don't want to reinvent the wheel here. But if you want to look at it further, it's entirely up to you. Steve, did you have your hand up?
And did she make a motion?
She did?
I would like to second that motion.
Okay. Now we'll further discuss. You know, I think we have a problem, and other towns do things about it. You said nobody's complained. Well, I believe Mr. Beach complained in his rather spirited talk about Cape Girardeau and how great they looked compared to our quarters. So to me, that was a complaint that things weren't getting done here.
And it's
So,
a good point, because it's an equal complaint both for owner occupied as well as for renters. And Mike and I have had this debate back and forth several times. I don't believe this is just a rental problem. I think
No,
this is
I don't either.
owner occupied as well. And if we
Properties
end
as
up
a
with
whole.
something, I think it's all got to be part of it.
I agree.
yes.
You know, things can be kind of skewed where they favor the good landlords. And, you know, like, if
I
you
don't
pass an
mind that.
inspection, if Ned passes an inspection, you shouldn't have to get that inspector for 5 years with glowing colors. But if you flunk and you continue to flunk, that thing needs to be, you know, every year. So, I mean, we can be flexible, we could come out with something that works for everybody.
Further comments or questions? Noah?
Yeah, I disagree with, at this stage in the game, with having members of the public on the committee for several reasons. I think if it's a staff and council only, I don't know, you know, the sunshine law is right off the top of my head, but I'm thinking if this is more of a planning thing as far as looking at our ordinances up to a certain point. If it's just staff and council, I'm not sure if this is something that needs to be open to the public every single time we meet on it until we actually get to the end result of what we are going to propose. And then, of course, at that point, you know, of course, I'd want public input and public meetings on it. But I think, you know, just a couple staff and a couple council, I think we'll get a lot more done and a lot quicker and have a proposal ready at the end of the trip.
I agree.
So I would like to make a motion to amend her motion, just to keep it staff and council.
Okay.
Mayor.
Do I hear a second?
Oh, I just wanted
Just a second.
to reply that you originally said you didn't think it was a good representation the study, and that's why I mentioned
Of what Mike did.
what Mike did.
That's
so
correct.
that's why I mentioned.
But
putting
Mike's
a renter
work has
on
already
there.
created a base, in my opinion. He's created a base, okay? And from conversation from this council right here, I'm getting the vibe that we want to look at, options. And so, my mind, I think, to actually be able to propose options, get options rolled out quickly, so that we can have public meetings on those options, I think it would be quicker if it was just a council and staff. We had public input, and we did have people we did have renters on Mike's thing, and some have argued that we've had landlords with Ned. So to me, I think, that's a good base. But I think what we're proposing here today is to bring a proposal to the public and to this council to vote on. And for that, I don't really necessarily think we need public opinion to get the proposal to the table.
Okay, before there's any further discussion, is there a second to his motion? To limit it to council and staff?
I second it.
Okay. Now discussion on that.
Yeah.
Steve?
A second ago, you wanted to add more information to this. If you want to get the real estate people, or you want to get the renters in here, and you want to get, I think if you're going to add information, let's get a group together that is a good representation and discuss it and get all the information in this time.
Isn't that just reinventing what Mike just did, though? Mike spent
No,
a year.
you wanted to add, so let's open it up.
Okay.
Ned?
If I may, and one of those comments probably came from me with regard to the survey. We've got a few of us, well, not too many of us. Noah, me, Henry, Morris. You remember when we cleaned up the cars and the driveways? Megan
Thank you,
and
guys.
Steve
Yeah.
drove around town, and we had a survey, right? It didn't say renters or owner occupied, it just said freaking cars. Sitting on blocks and all that kind of stuff. That was a survey. We got 3,300 properties in the city, basically. 1,100 rental units in the city. I mean, the committee itself, Steve, could do that survey. I'm not asking for a great big, huge thing. I think Noah's absolutely right. You keep this small, you get a proposal, and then you take it out to the public and let them have their say.
And then you say, we got more information over here, start again?
Am I saying that?
No, will Noah say that?
No, that information will come out, because I'm going to obviously volunteer to be on the committee. So, I mean, this information will be presented to that committee. My only concern is what were originally proposed through Becky's motion is basically doing Mike's committee all over again, but adding a realtor and a landlord to it. But otherwise, basically doing the work Mike already did.
That's what you asked for, more
That's what I asked for originally,
representation.
and that didn't happen. But we're beyond that now. We're beyond that. I get the feeling from, and maybe I'm misunderstanding this council, I'm getting a feeling from this council that they want to take some action. So if that's the case, we're beyond arguing about where the information came from. Now we're more past that, and we're at what's our next option? What's our next move? Let's present an option, and let's see where we go with it. Maybe the option's no option. Maybe the option remains status quo. I don't know. That's remaining to be seen. But I think you're confusing my comments about the work Mike did versus where we're at now. We're at a different position now. Mike's already did a lot of foundation work for us. We're at a totally different position. Now we're proposing, the mayor had proposed that we just have a small committee of staff and council members to come up with, I think Mike left it off on his thing, his very last page was, what's the next step? That's what we're looking for now. What's the next step? We're not trying to reinvent Mike's committee and the work that they did.
And in my original proposal, I'm not asking that anything be reinvented. I'm saying we take this report and we meet and we get input from the renters. Now, if that is in the initial meeting, I think they need to be involved in the process at some point. And if we decide as a council it's not initially in that original planning, then that's fine. But I think it's very important that we involve the community. And at the public comments even, we may have renters come in.
Well, and I will tell you, as the person that gets to call people to serve on this committee, it's not easy to find renters that want to speak out against their landlords.
Well, I understand.
Retaliation.
Yeah.
So you can find some things on Facebook. I see things on Facebooks about various landlords and that sort of thing, but you're going to have a hard time getting them to serve on a committee, I believe. But I will try if that's what you want.
Well, I mean, they may come in at the public comments. I'm not saying necessarily bring
Yeah.
them into the committee, but we need to make it
Yeah.
open for their input if they
So-
choose to do that.
Don't be disappointed if they don't show up.
And Mike had that difficulty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I was going to second that. It was very hard to get inputs from renters. Landlord Association at least is formed for their own purposes before this was formed. They were, in numbers, they were at our meetings. They were providing input to us. They even asked us to come to their meeting. So it was easy to get that kind of input, very hard to get renters' input. I mean, I work on a house that looks like it might be a rental property, and I have almost weekly different people coming by asking if this is going to be for rent, and that they have a difficult time finding anything of quality in the area. But those are all, I don't have details, I don't know where they are. It's hard to get them formed, hard to get that information. Yes, they might come to public comment, but I think more likely you'd get either the landlord association or owners who don't own rental property to show up at the public forum.
yeah, and I don't believe there's an organized rental group. I would be surprised if there is.
Oh, renters?
For renters. There's no
Not that
one
I'm aware of.
there. So they're at a disadvantage there. So we have a motion and a second to amend it to only council people and staff. Noah?
Just one more comment.
Uh-huh.
Another thing I want you to understand about my reasoning for that is that mobility, a small committee of staff and a couple council people, I think, are going to produce some options to this council much quicker than a full-blown redo of Mike's work. Because if we go Mike's route and you have members of the public on it, my understanding is we're going to have public meetings every time. It's not going to be what's the word I'm looking for?
Operational meeting.
An operational meeting to go over our current ordinances and how we can improve them versus a full-blown public meeting every time we meet. So that's another part of my reasoning, because I think we can bring work product to this council and to the public much quicker. And at that time, the public's free to make comment about whatever proposal we put forward, and they can come in and argue for or against it as well as we could. So
I would agree, and that was my original proposal,
that's what I
which
thought
you
you were trying to
disagreed
do
with.
originally.
Right. Okay. I'm calling the question.
Okay, good.
Roll call. Everybody understand the question on the
This
table?
is on the amendment.
Yes, this is to amend it to council and staff.
Council, okay. Beach,
Yes.
Hurt,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Ayers,
Yes.
Heaton,
Yes?
Young,
No.
Evans,
No.
Meadows.
No.
And what is the tally?
5-3.
Thank you for not having a
Yes.
Thank you.
Now,
Okay.
Call the question on
So
the-
now we call the question on
This is Becky's motion.
meeting, yes.
Okay.
No?
No.
Well, it's Becky's
The
motion
passed to this
amended.
day at issue.
The amended motion.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Everybody understand what they're voting on this time? Steve?
So who's on the committee? You haven't decided.
Well, we have to vote first,
Both
Do you-
on,
and then I'll ask for volunteers.
You shouldn't have to vote.
No,
because
I think
The
not
other
even,
the
that's
other
already,
amendment,
okay.
the amendment passed, so there's no
Amendment
vote
passed.
on this one.
Okay, I'm looking for volunteers, and I can have no more than 2. Or I don't want more than 2. Because if we have more than 2, then we have to jump through a lot more hoops.
Sunshine.
Noah's
you got, Noah?
volunteering.
Noah?
Thank you.
And you got Curry.
I'll volunteer.
Corey? Very good. Okay. Excellent.
Steve's my backup.
We'll expect a full report at the next.
I don't think so.
So it's me and Noah from council with Megan and Earl.
And Steve Haig. Steve will be in on it.
Maybe others.
And others as needed. Okay, any other miscellaneous?
Got one thing.
Morris.
And Earl, you might need to help me on this one, but there's some crazy rumors going around about our dog pound. We do not have money appropriated for a new dog pound, but we do have a fund set up where people could make a donation towards their dog pound. Correct?
That's accurate, yes.
Yes.
It's been on the
Well-
planning list for a long time, but it has never reached the fundable level of where it had money actually allocated to it. But there is a, one arm of the foundation that we created
Yes.
that is for an animal shelter and animal care. So
Well-
it's in existence and it's already has the 501c3, so anything you do is tax deductible to it, yes.
Oh, I think,
And it will be maintained for that use only. It's not commingled with the city. Actually, the city doesn't have anything to do with it anymore, so.
but somehow over the past weekend, a rumor got out that we had money already set aside. And the telephones I got, I said, no, that's not true. We do have a.
We've talked about it a lot. It's been on the list, but it's not been funded.
If somebody wanted to donate money to it, who should they contact?
John Baker?
John Baker?
Yes.
And then the only other thing, I've talked to Bobby about it, the other part of that rumor is out there, our firing range, there have been some stray shots going up towards our dog pound, which Bobby said he was unaware of it. And so if that does happen, then I think the police, chief of police should be notified so that he can handle it and everything. So that's the only two things I need to get clarified.
Okay. Any other miscellaneous? Well, I appreciate your input on this. I think this was a good discussion. It's not a particularly easy discussion, and it certainly, there won't be an easy solution to it. I think whoever made the comment, and I think it was probably Mike Kelly, we're not going to change anything overnight. This is going to be a slow process, but we need to get started somehow and do something. So I appreciate your concerns and your opinions, and we'll see what the committee comes up with. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.